Okay, Phil.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. I always find it strange because I'm never sure if everyone can hear me, but I'm assured that we have now started the webinar and we are recording this. Welcome everyone to our webinar with Envu and Origin Immunity Solutions. This is titled High Performance Turf, Biostimulant Innovation with Fiata Stressgard. I'm Phil Logan. I'm the Key Account Manager for Envu in Europe, and I'm joined by Kelly-Marie Clack and Dr. Richard Rees. I'll allow them to introduce themselves in just a moment. We hope everyone's well, and just to get us started, hopefully you're aware the webinar will run for 1 hour. So yeah, notebooks out, paying attention. There's a lot of information. For those of you who are interested, there's CPD points for both basis and bigger. Those will be available at the end. And as we move through, I'd encourage you to use the chat box on your screen for questions. I'll try and get to those as we go. But if not, we'll have some time at the end. So I'm kind of the host of the webinar and talking through a few bits and pieces. And then my co-guests will be in when required. So without further ado, we can introduce our speakers today. Kelly, could you start the process, please?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm sure quite a few of you know me by now. I'm Kelly-Marie Clack, and I'm the Technical Manager for Origin Immunity Solutions. My role involves going around the country from football venues, rugby, golf, horse racing, any managed immunity space, basically, and supporting groundsmen and greenkeepers and our staff around the country. So hand you over to Richard.
Yeah, hi. Sorry. Thank you, Kelly. And yes, obviously, Dr. Richard Rees, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. This is Richard Rees. I've been working in the turfgrass industry for many years, mainly in the United States and Canada, but also in other parts of the world, Japan, Australia, and the UK. And I'm responsible for the team that brought Fiata Stressgard to the market a number of years ago in the United States, and want to give my appreciation to both Phil and Kelly for inviting me to tell you about it today.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, it's going to be great to get your thoughts and opinions on the product at this point. So, as we relaunched last year. So, okay, so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes now taking you through briefly what Fiata Stressgard is, because I appreciate that if you don't know what it is, it would be quite difficult to give a webinar. So a couple of minutes just on the product itself, and then we're going to go into turf stress and what that means for your turf and how Fiata Stressgard can help with those things, as well as other management techniques. Some new STRI research that's just come out last year, and then we'll just sort of round it up with a little bit of a Q&A. Okay, so here we go. Fiata Stressgard then. I imagine there's a few people on the call. I hope there's a few people on the call who've used the product now. But I also hope there's a few people that haven't. But essentially, what do we have here? Well, it's from Envu. It's our first biostimulant category product to the UK market, which we would normally have been used to things like fungicides such as Xtera Stressgard. But this is the start of a new classification for us, biostimulants. What does it actually mean? Well, you may be familiar with the term Stressgard if you've used Envu products in the past, like Xtera. And I like to separate our products out. If you see the name Stressgard, then you know you're getting something in there which doesn't tend to change between the products that classify themselves as Stressgard. The only thing that changes is the name at the top. And in this case, in Fiata, we have potassium phosphate. Many people on the call will know potassium phosphate well. It's well researched into what it does, and I'm not going to go into that in too much detail today because we don't have the time. But of course, below the red line on your screen here, you will see there are two things, and this is consistent across the Stressgard range. We have two things. One thing I think people are very familiar with is that it has a pigment in there. Okay, and that's clear in the color of the bottle and the spray that you see, and the instant effect on the turf. There's also a very special proprietary ingredient in there, which is unique to Stressgard, and that is really part of the well, I'm not going to go into any detail because Richard will tell us all about it, but we know that that's one of the key drivers when it comes to the stress mitigation properties that we see from Stressgard products, not just Fiata, but Stressgard products. Why is Fiata so important for UK turf managers? Because now that we don't have it's not a plant protection product, it's under the term of a biostimulant, you now have unrestricted access to that technology. As we know, plant protection products come with limited amounts of application that you can apply, and of course we must really only apply plant protection products for disease control, whereas now we can use this product to leverage the benefits of Stressgard. And if we look at when I started the Fiata Stressgard project a couple of years ago, we kind of came to the four conclusions of what this product could do. And one of the key properties of Fiata Stressgard was its ability to improve the tolerance of stress, in particular traffic stress, heat stress, drought stress, generally under mild to moderate stress conditions. Okay, when things get very stressful, we have to implement more strategies, such as PGRs, wetting agents, nutrition, fungicides. Of course, they're all important. Clearly, there was always a better turf quality straight away and long term. That's part of the pigment, part of the Stressgard that's in there as well, and particularly when used alongside growth regulators such as Trinexapac-ethyl, there's an additional benefit to the turf quality. Third point, an interesting one, is the reduced water usage. I'm sure Richard's going to give us much more detail on that. Sorry, I'm not taking up Richard's time. It's just my 5 minutes at the start. But certainly in all field conditions, we saw between 20 and 50%. We know it's quite hard to measure that because field conditions are very variable, but certainly integrated into a program for summer stress and drought tolerance, it showed some very good results. And then for anyone who's a particular expert on potassium phosphate, we know that in the presence of disease, it can improve overall turf quality via the mechanism of natural defenses, but it's very, very important that we note that it's not a fungicide, and we wouldn't expect it to be. But it's well documented in science that it does improve plant defense mechanisms. Stressgard then, so that's the potassium phosphate. Stressgard then, as a concept, it's our formulation. It's Envu's expert formulation. It goes beyond the active. It gives immediate plant health benefits via selective UV filtering, which Richard will give us some more details on, improve instant color but long-term benefits, drought stress reduction, faster recovery, general improvement in performance, and of course, if you can enhance chlorophyll and photosynthesis, then you're going to have a benefit on the plant. And if we think about it as a treatment that is initially applied to assess a stress, if we can regularly apply those treatments, we can leverage those benefits throughout the year, which is what's really great about Fiata in particular with the unrestricted application numbers. What does it actually mean? Kind of looks a bit like that. So that's Fiata Stressgard in a nutshell. I'm going to now sort of start Q&A with Richard and Kelly. And the first thing I wanted to really go down was turf stress. It's quite often an overused term, very, very broad. And I guess what I want to get from you, Richard, and from your experience, what are the most common and damaging types of stress that turf managers face? I guess particularly in summer would be what I'm interested in.
Yeah, and apart from the key biotic stresses that you deal with as turf managers every day, Pythium, anthracnose, dollar spot, whatever it might be, there are what's termed abiotic stresses, such as heat and drought, those both interrelated. one of the key stresses that we don't understand as well as we should is the effects of extreme radiation, such as UV light, and actually excessive photosynthetically active radiation that most cool season turf plants struggle to mitigate. And in particular, UV radiation shuts down the plant. It actually stops the photosynthetic activity of the within the chloroplasts, and that is a topic where our Stressgard technology protects the plant from that radiation and moderates it sufficiently for the plant to perform at its best, and in particular, the plant cell's energy source, which leads to the other effects of supporting the roots and actually supporting the whole plant against those things that you see every day on your courses or on your fields, in terms of the mechanical stress from foot and cart traffic, in particular in the United States. And these can be major contributors to the overall aesthetics of the course, because the drier it is, the more sensitive the tissue will be, and the long-lasting effects of that wear come forward. So, in terms of the protecting the plant via this light-mediating product in Stressgard technology, this is the key factor, the number one factor in the mechanism of the product's action.
So in terms of this slide that we've got up on the screen here, something I'm very familiar with. I wonder if you could just give us your thoughts on this graph in terms of what are we seeing here? We've clearly got the light wavelengths with and without Stressgard. What does that actually mean?
What we're doing here is we're reducing the amount of excitation radiation which can damage the plant cells, and this happens through the generation of free radicals within, which are very cell membrane damaging and makes the cells leaky, which then exacerbates the effect of drought and heat on the plant. If you remove those wavelengths using the pigment in a regular program, the Stressgard technology enables you to manage that excess radiation, and this is what you're seeing through the transmission on silanized glass, where we're clearly demonstrating here that radiation is being blocked.
Okay, so essentially lets more of the light that plants require, but blocks the sort of degrading light that could have an issue with chlorophyll. And then, okay, so I think that's good. I think we can see that this is maybe the effect of like excessive light, but I did want to get your thoughts on low light conditions, because I came across this slide and I thought it was kind of interesting. If you could maybe just talk through what we're seeing on the screen now.
Yeah, during the development of Ohio State did some studies on these cross sections of the leaf of a Stressgard treated plant versus an untreated on the right hand side. And the differences here are that as I mentioned about the thick rigid cell walls, that's the response. And under shade, shade is one of the biggest enemies of many managers trying to grow turf under shade conditions. We know that, and keeping up the internal turgor pressure is probably of the plant. So ensuring that there's sufficient water in the leaf at all times so that the plant can function correctly this is the key between the two, treated and untreated. The large voids between the cells give far more room for the water to be removed from the leaf structure, and by reducing that, keeping the turgor, and also at the same time allowing the plant to reach its full potential under these shade conditions. Now, it's very interesting that low light conditions, there's also response, but also response in high light conditions. So
Yeah.
this was always the question we had, is overall the effects on plant morphology were extremely important in giving that uniform look across the turf, both greens and fairways.
Yes, it's good this, because Richard doesn't really know which slides come in next, so I'm kind of just I've got some slides played up here, and it's really great to get his thoughts on these slides, having been involved in the very early development work of Fiata. And one thing I think is really interesting is what you said about the pigment protecting chlorophyll, reducing the leakage, if you like. And one thing I always show customers is this simple graph on the impact of chlorophyll whilst using Stressgard. And I mean, is that as simple as what we're seeing here? Is it, applications of Stressgard are protecting chlorophyll, and therefore, there's more?
Yeah, in simple form, it is a protection process. This is true of any drought stress or any heat stress. The application of stress, and this is in duration of heat stress over weeks, and this is done at greater than 85 degrees Fahrenheit, greater than 25 to 30 degrees centigrade. And the key here is under the heat stress, you retain the chlorophyll rather than losing it. So it's a retention. And that's extremely important, because you're not producing more. You're not asking the plant to work harder. You're simply retaining what the plant can manage already. So this is what this graph is showing us, is that under those heat conditions, the inability of the plant to retain its chlorophyll.
For you then, do you think it's important that from a stress perspective, and I guess we're talking about heat stress in this graph here, would timing of things like Stressgard, if you were looking to use Stressgard for stress management, would it certainly be a preventative, or could you use it curatively at all? Would you want it in the program to begin with?
Yeah, well, it's clear. If you start trying to do things curatively, you're not actually going through the process of retaining what you want, but it's already been lost. So actually moving to a system where you're improving chlorophyll and not just retaining it, I think you're in a situation here where if you try to do this curatively, you've got to do a lot of other things. And to a certain extent, much of what's done in syringing techniques to reduce heat, applying water treatments as such, that's now curative, and it's curative on a daily basis. Whereas the Stressgard technology offers the ability not to reach that point at which you need to intervene quite as long or quite as hard as you would do without it. So I think we're giving the plant, by using it preventively, the opportunity to continue with time in a state that is easier to manage. So that's the way I look at the preventive versus curative. Getting on a program, the ability to use a biostimulant frequently as needed, that is that I think is to maintain the plant's integrity over a period of time, rather than trying to bring it back from, although we have shown in studies with Rutgers that the recovery after a drought or a heat period is faster when applying this, but only when you apply it on a frequent basis.
You're only going to come out of stress in a better shape if you've gone in more prepared than if you've tried to fix it.
That's it. And it doesn't matter whether you're dealing with summer stress or whether you're dealing with winter stress.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
the same story.
Yeah. And Kelly, I'm going to throw you on here. Based on everything that sort of Richard said, I know you're familiar with this graph here, but does this when we talk about, I think when we see that he mentioned that in high light intensities things are being protected, and in low light intensities things are being are enhancing photosynthesis. I mean, do you think this is important for turf managers at the moment to pay attention to when it comes to photosynthesis?
Yeah, I think in the UK market we've seen quite a big change in weather patterns. We've just touched on quite a few things that are relevant at the moment for UK turf managers. Last November we saw some of the minimal light levels we've seen in the UK at that time of year. So if you can improve the health of your plant going into them low light conditions, it's always going to be a massive help. And I think we've always got to remember, you've got to piece these technologies on top of each other. It's not about one thing. Sustainable, responsible management of turf is all about piecing together a good balanced nutritional program with a good moisture management program, and using these biostimulants on top of that to give you better turf health, better root systems, better overall turf quality, so it's less susceptible for them diseases. I like to use the word priming. We are priming our turf to withstand the challenges that it might face, whether that be high levels of light, low levels of light, or disease pressures.
Yeah, to bring it back to the real world, I was golfing just yesterday, and not often we have stress towards the end of April, but I think certainly we've had some really stressful conditions already this year. Yeah. And the greens I was playing on yesterday, you could see it. The pole was seeding. Things were, it's, you just never know when it's going to come these days. It really is it's particularly spring. It's a bit of a guessing game.
It is, yeah. I mean, we've faced quite dry conditions over the last few weeks, and that looks set to continue. I was looking last week at the dollar spot pressure. We're just starting to see the signs that Smith-Kearns pressure is increasing quite nicely above that 20% in areas, and I think this week we will see that further. So using these technologies in a programmed approach is the best way to use them for all the benefits that we've seen today. I mean, I get excited about this product. I've worked with you on this film now for 12 months, and the first time we saw the data set, which Richard will have been hugely involved in, I think he presented me with 150 slides. There is that much research on this product.
And that was probably half of what Richard first prepared. So there's a lot of research done. And I guess that's a good point to take us back to before we go into our next point. Is we mentioned at the start, Richard, that you took this product to the market. You were in the innovation team. You led the innovation team that brought Fiata to the United States. And so one question I've never asked you is really why? Why did you start the project? What was the requirement of US turf managers, and how did it evolve as you went?
Well, this actually starts. It's extremely interesting where a lot of these come from. We actually got this from our advisory boards that we run with superintendents in particular. In this case, it was superintendents in both the US and the UK. And I remember we had a meeting at the London Club when Peter Todd was running the agronomy program there. And he'd been there during the construction phase. And a lot of the topics that came up were along the lines of how are we going to deal with drought and heat stress in the future? I spent a lot of time on my greens in particular. The same came out of the US, but we'd already started with the Stressgard technology in our signature brand products, and they were actually designated for greens. So someone said, well, actually, we have as much stress, particularly from cart traffic and footwear, foot traffic, and it's not just about the greens; it's about fairways. And so we said, well, we just can't produce a product out of the signature brands that we could afford to put on fairways. So we said, where do we go now? And we looked at what was popular, and believe you me, there were a lot of discussions had with superintendents, and through these advisory committees that we set up. And the insights we received from there said clearly, you need a fairway product with Stressgard technology that can be used and not at the cost that we're looking at. And by the way, we need some drought stress relief, and we also need you to manage heat for us and
so not radiation. They didn't want too much from you then. They weren't asking that much.
And the same way we're in greens, and we said, well, yeah, let's put a product together. We've got some idea of some inert ingredients we can use to maybe support the way we put this product together to do the things that we're looking at. We put those in a formulation with dipotassium phosphates. And we decided that, yes, this is technology we're stacking together now, because each piece of this is providing a contribution, whereas if you apply them separately, they really aren't doing enough. And we did a lot of work. Actually, we started off on Bermuda grass fairways because we didn't have a product on Bermuda grass fairways, and we felt it would be a good market. Unfortunately, the stress under which Bermuda grass comes from drought is way more than, and in particular, we were out in Arizona where there isn't a real disease problem, of course. We were testing there on Bermuda grass, which would then later for the winter play would be overseeded with ryegrass.
Yeah, sure.
And that's where we started the Fiata story from. And eventually we decided this is good, it's working well, but we need to go into the bent grass market, into the cool season turf market with this product on fairways, because the insights are telling us that's really what the turf managers need. And so that's how we ended up with Fiata, Stressgard, and working together to put these components together, proprietary component. And the only way you can actually register the plant health claims of a product like this in the United States is by having a registered active ingredient. And that, in this case, was the phosphate. And so that enabled us to get the plant health claim registrations that we needed in order to promote the product through EPA.
It's interesting. We're the complete opposite here, but it's good to hear the differences in the market. And I think it's really good to always compare back to, the US and the UK. A lot of similarities in the way that we like to manage our turf, but we also do things so differently, and it's great to hear that. And personally, when I came across Fiata and we did the work, the background, the 150 slides that Kelly's alluded to, there's not many products that you come to that are brand new, that's already got 10, 15, 20 years worth of research. You can just say, wow, it's already packaged, ready to go. So that's why we're particularly excited to bring it into the UK now, because we already know what it does. People just need to have a go with it and see how it fits their programs. And there's a million ways that people can try it. And and it benefits. So it's great to hear that.
Well, I would just say, Phil, listening through customer advisory councils, so superintendents, turf managers of football fields, whatever it might be, these are the people that will give you the insights to develop new products.
Yeah, no,
and
absolutely.
I believe this is what you've done with Fiata Stressgard, because it's clear you needed a biostimulant in the market. You want to be able to use it often as you can, and this was the ideal opportunity. And the product was already made. It wasn't, it was there and available. You just had to register it in the right way.
Yeah, as soon as I arrived to Envu, it was like we need Stressgard, and we need to be able to use it often, because we can see the benefits, but we can't really leverage the benefits whilst it's part of a package of a fungicide. And I think that's where it's really put itself apart. And I know one thing I can't do while I've got you on the call, one thing I can't skip past is to talk about roots. And I just wanted to get, I know that this is clearly a hydroponic root system here. I just wanted to get your thoughts. Certainly, I think from my time in turf management, roots are sometimes an underspoken, and I know that they're huge in the States. Roots are part of everyone's conversation. Not saying that we don't, but it's not always the top priority when it comes to turf managers here. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on root management, root health, and what Stressgard, in your opinion, has done or not done.
Yeah, actually, this fantastic picture, I believe these are parts of setups that we had at the golf show a few years ago.
Yeah.
And the key to this is, if you get everything right on the above ground part of the plant, then you enable the following things. You enable strong root growth. It's clear that there is a correlation between chlorophyll, active chlorophyll, photosynthetic active activity in the plant, and root growth. Everybody understands that well. And what you're seeing here is the protection that Stressgard technology is giving, is enabling those roots to grow. So this is a direct response of reducing stress. These plants were stressed. In this case, it was Poa annua, and everybody knows how Poa annua reacts to heat stress.
Yeah, not well.
And the key is you're seeing the effects here, and it really is the difference. And if you go to any turf manager who uses, they will tell you that their roots are stronger. And some of the work we did with North Carolina State University was to establish what the root function was. It's not just about more roots or maintaining a healthy root, but with healthy root function is one of the key things we need to look at. And as Kelly said, if you have much better root function, then you're going to use those nitrogen sources you're applying or whatever it might be more efficiently, because it's the function of the roots that is important in the uptake of that nitrogen. And it's you're clearly seeing only an effect here on root mass, but what you really need to see is the work that's been done on root function, and that is extremely complicated.
Yeah,
and
webinar.
and way beyond what we would want to present today. But
yeah,
there is a lot of work to ensure that this is not just a mass effect. It is root function that's important too.
Yeah, Envu certainly like to get into the science. I will hand that to us. We're pretty good with that. Anyway, that's kind of the first half, and it's great to get your feedback on that, Richard. Really appreciate it. It's interesting stuff, things I've never even heard. So that was great. I just to touch on what it actually means for turf management as a whole. We talked a lot about physiological effects and what it does to the plant, the roots. But really, what does it actually mean when it comes to the turf performance? And this, I guess, Richard, if you could just give us your last few thoughts on this trial. I think this sort of summarizes Stressgard quite well, particularly in terms of your traffic thing that you were mentioning.
I believe this trial is also one that was conducted at Rutgers
That's true.
University.
Yeah, 2018.
And the effect of traffic we talked about, and in this case, they used a special mechanized piece of equipment to simulate the traffic in one direction. You can see through the center of those plots. That's really where you need to focus from the picture point of view. And you see clearly with the Stressgard products, a deal of protection from the wear. This turf is under incredible stress, both from heat, probably a little bit of drought effect going on here as well as the traffic. And often you compound those effects by having all those things happening together. And you can see with the Stressgard treated plots, as you use this wonderful piece of colorization technology, that it does show this is really extreme. This is an extreme test. Of
course, absolutely.
And wonderful that we're able to help out by using this technology to do this.
Yeah, I always really like this trial because it takes out it compares just the active and plus a pigment, but also takes the Stressgard. So really, you're comparing true across the board. You're not just comparing untreated to all singing, all dancing product, which is really nice. Anyway, that's great. Okay, Kelly, I just want to bring you in. Sorry, Richard and I haven't had a good chat there. It's been great to get his thoughts on all that. But clearly, I know there'll be many turf managers in the call that will be familiar with potassium phosphate. And I just really kind of wanted to get your thoughts on, what since we've been working together on this, what sets it apart from phosphates that you know, or even things like wetting agents. We've talked a lot about drought and heat management. Where's the differences there for you? And clearly we can show people just how to get information on phosphates, but what's your thoughts on that as a practical level?
Yeah, I mean, I think the UK market now is quite, everybody really knows what phosphates do. We can always refer back to John Dempsey's work. He's written many papers on the role of phosphate. We know that this particular product has got a nice amount of phosphate in there and fits in with the recommendations that John set in his work. People are using phosphates anyway. What lets Fiata stand out from the crowd is the Stressgard technology. We know that the phosphates are going to give us the enhanced defense mechanisms of the plant. So we've already said about the priming of the plant, prime it ready to defend itself against them pathogens that might be there on the leaf and in the plant. But we know it doesn't have an effect on that fungal pathogen. So in the UK, this is not a registered fungicide, it is a biostimulant. The Stressgard technology, we know that this unique formulation, and we've been through this a little bit today, the Stressgard, but I think, Phil, you've written a really excellent review of Stressgard technologies in the April edition of the Greenkeeper International. So if people want to know more, we've got a really nice review of Stressgard technology. And we know that this is enhancing and protecting that chlorophyll. So what we get is a truly immense colour. I love that word, immense.
Just on wetting agents, I know what's your thoughts?
I think
different things or not?
I mean, it's totally different. And I think we've got to remember that to produce a really healthy plant, we need to think about good management, sustainable management, responsible stewardship of our site. So we need to think about good aeration practices. We need to think about good management of nutrition. We want the right levels of nitrogen. We don't want too much. We don't want enough. So looking at things like clip volume can really help to support the amount of nitrogen we're using. We should be taking soil samples to make sure that we've got the other nutrients in the soil. But managing moisture is a fundamental of turf management, whether you're on a golf course or a winter sports pitch. So making sure that you've got a moisture meter, and there are many different types of wetting agent technologies. You need to be looking at what the weather's like, what the evapotranspiration rates are like, using that the wetting agents to manage the moisture in the soil. I think where Fiata comes into its own, and when you go through the trial data shortly, Phil, you will show this. The Fiata helps to mask any of them issues, so it helps to keep the turf looking well and playing well. So if you are in drought conditions, and at that point applying a wetting agent, we might not be able to get that wetting agent into the soil where we want it. Evapotranspiration rates are going to be quite high. So this is where the Fiata will help with that additional stress mitigation and help to keep the surfaces looking well, which we know is really important, whatever turf grass we are responsible for. So I think that nicely moves you in, Phil, to some of your data.
Good, yeah. So we're reasonable on time. I think we're doing quite well. I'm going to now take us through. So some people have had this research now. Maybe some people on the call. I'm going to spend 10 minutes talking to you about an SCRI trial that we did last year on Fiata Stressgard, which really just copied a trial that was done at Rutgers. So Richard, if you want to jump in at any point, please let me know. Hopefully my research methods are robust, but we'll see. We'll find out. So we did a summer trial at the STRI last year. Kelly, you were aware of that. You came and visited many, many times. We obviously looked at Fiata Stressgard. And you can see here, a question I get often, can you create a drought at the STRI? Well, no, not really, and not unless you've got a fancy wooden contraption with a cover over the top to stop the rain. If you have that, you can create a drought, I promise you that. So what we wanted to look at was the performance of Fiata under drought conditions and what I'm calling normal, which means no drought, okay? Hopefully from all the stuff we've talked about, you'll not be surprised that it did work, but also just wanted to show this research anyway. We looked at differing rates, an important factor, because as it's a biostimulant, you can alter and change the rates to fit your turfgrass needs. And we compared it to a common pigment on the market. In this case, we used Rider, which we know is a pigment as well as the pigment that's in Fiata Stressgard. And we wanted to look at it beside Primo Max. Richard, you did a lot of research with Fiata in Primo Max, didn't you, in the early days?
Well, yes. I mean, that it's a standard part of a turf manager's program.
Absolutely.
So it's very important to make sure that it integrates well with, in this case, a biostimulant. And we see no contraindication to that. We see only benefits. And I think that's a great thing. There are very, very well managed turf surfaces using Primo Max, and absolutely no question, it's one of the greatest tools in the marketplace. But there are some things that we can do to improve the look and also the way the plant reacts to it, because the fact that you use a growth regulator means you're also putting it under chemical stress at that point. Very, very good use of a combination in program with Fiata Stressgard we found is excellent. And not only that, we used our signature brands extensively and found that we had some great responses in program with Primo Max, particularly in the case when back in a few years ago, where we were having issues with our fungicide programs containing DMI fungicides, particularly on POA, and we were able to alleviate even the stress from the DMI products. So
there's plenty of things that we do. There's plenty of things, whether it be chemical stress or even mechanical stress. There's lots of stresses that we impart as turf managers, which we should aim to try and mitigate if we can. Primo Max was in there alone because we want to look at that difference. It was just a 14-week trial. It was a bit of a quick 6-week drought, if you like. So we applied the products, we let the trial dry out, and look, 3.6% VMC on the 15th of August. There's many turf managers in this call. If anybody sees that on their moisture meter in the morning, it's get to the hoses basically. We then, as we did in the US, after the drought period, we watered the area just to watch the recovery. So a really nice trial, and I'm going to just quickly go on to the results. I mean, if I show you the difference between drought and irrigated, so it's the exact same trial with the exact same treatments, as you can see here. And if anybody wants to compare them later, you can take a picture of the blocks there because they directly compare. So if you see at the top left, that would be a number 3. So that's Fiata Stressgard at 20 litres per hectare on both sides. And that's the difference. That was the level of drought that we imparted. So yes, you can get a drought at Bingley. And the first thing that any good researcher does is finds the untreateds, because that's where you compare everything from. So I've highlighted them for you so that you can get a good idea of what things do. And then anything in green here is kind of pigments. Okay, there's Rider in there, there's Fiata Stressgard, but it really just highlights that almost that pigment effect. Okay, there's the Stressgard element as well, but I'll show that in the data rather than the images. Really interesting thing, Richard, what you said about the Primo Max. You can see that on the left, that's Primo, and on the right is Primo Plus Fiata Stressgard. So you can see that yellowing effect. Okay, and in high drought conditions, that could be expected. Same thing on the irrigated side. It was kind of the exact same story, if you like. You could see the same effect from Primo on the left and Fiata on the right. So there's some form of synergy there, but it just wasn't as stark because the stress is not as high. Then we recovered the plots. And one thing just to note here was just to really show you the standout. And you can certainly see some of the pigments in here now. And you can see the effect of Stressgard. So this was after the drought phase, once we'd watered the plots and we saw the recovery. And yeah, we saw some really nice recovery with Fiata when we went in prepared and we came out strong. But I'm going to spend 3 minutes talking to you about the data. There are some graphs here, but I'll zoom through them because I think it's quite easy to pick up. Turf quality, the standard for all researchers before you go into the complicated stuff. How good does it look? 1, it looks terrible. 9, it looks fantastic. Everything in between. This was the average in the trial. So we take the entire trial, we average out the data of how good things looked. And this is in the maintain side, okay? And what you'll notice is there's some letters here. Anywhere that the letter is different, in scientific terms, means you can confidently say there was a treatment effect. And it was no surprise to see that anything containing Fiata significantly impacted on turf quality, as it did with Rider. Okay, that's what we would have expected. And the same thing happened on the drought side of the trial. We saw an impact on turf quality overall in the trial with anything that contained, in this case, it was generally the pigment effect which had that impact on drought turf quality. I'm sure it's not a surprise to anyone on the call. We saw the same thing with turf colour. Maintain side, Fiata Plus Primo, and Rider, all delivering an impact on turf colour. And you can see there was no real negative impact, and there was no negative on to turf colour when we applied Primo Plus Fiata. We go to the drought side of the trial now. We look at the turf colour. Is it nice colour? Is it bad colour? Again, it wouldn't be a surprise. We saw a slight rate effect here with a higher rate delivering more turf colour than the lower rate of Fiata Stressgard. Again, Primo not being able to do anything under the stress conditions in particular. And again, anything with a pigment in this case did deliver turf colour. I would fully expect that. Now, this is where it goes back to all the stuff that Richard mentioned earlier about chlorophyll, photosynthesis. This was really nice to see that when we measured chlorophyll, and the STRI have a special chlorophyll meter, a spectrum meter, which measures chlorophyll in the grass at the time. Again, this was averaged, so this is a culmination of about 20 assessments. And on the maintain side, so no stress. Okay, well, some stress, just not much drought stress. We delivered a significant increase on chlorophyll using Fiata Stressgard as we would have expected based on the research that we've done in the US and all of the early work that Richard did. But what was really interesting to see was that promise that we make, that the Stressgard is really the driver of this product. A standard pigment alone was unable to deliver any impact on chlorophyll. So it did deliver on turf quality and turf color, but there was no impact on chlorophyll, which was a surprise for me, I'll be honest. As well as that, what I was happy to see, and with scientific confidence, we saw the same thing on the other side of the trial, is that certainly in these conditions, we actually needed a little bit more Fiata. We needed that 20 litre per hectare application rate. And again, a sort of standard pigment, OK, was able to deliver on colour, on quality, but not on true plant health. So for any agronomists on the call that do use NDVI or turf managers, just to be aware that the NDVI, if you're regularly using pigment, can be a little bit funny. And that really comes down to the way that the NDVI meters work and the way that pigments impact light. I won't go into the science now, but if anyone is using NDVI and perhaps thinks they want to start using Fiata Stressgard, please reach out at the end and I can discuss it in more detail. But it could. Richard, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, Phil, that's an important point. You're absolutely right about NDVI. Normalized difference vegetation index is not a good measure in this case with pigment treated plots, irrespective of which pigments used. And we have adopted. We actually have drones that we use today, which do have very high definition cameras, and we measure RGB indices, that red, blue, green indices that give us the differences we want to show. So in the future, that's where turf managers will be able to use their own drones to check on their the color that they want for their turf grass, and those today are relatively cheap, and perhaps that index is going to end up on an app one day, pretty quick to read on a regular basis. So look, that's looking to the future a bit, but I see that we use that technology and integrate those pictures very quickly. So
yeah,
there's ways to measure it, but not this way.
Yeah, really important. I mean, normally NDVI and chlorophyll could be related, but when you bring in pigments, it completely ruins things. So, yeah, I know that not everyone will use NDVI, so I don't want to dwell on it for too long. The last thing we did see, which was really interesting, was that we did see an effect on disease, in this case, anthracnose. But I think it's just really an important point to note before we go into the summary, is that we really saw that Fiata and including Ryder all delivered a result which would, to a lot of people, say, wow, these products control anthracnose, and I think that would be incorrect. There may be some element of plant health defense mechanisms going on, but there's also the effect of pigments perhaps hiding some of that anthracnose underneath. So it's just really a point to notice that
extremely anthracnose is extremely good measure because it's a stress related disease.
Absolutely.
If you remove the stress, then you don't leave the plant susceptible for anthracnose.
Yeah, good point. So really, from a summary of the STRI, the take-home messages were that if you use it in a program, it just delivered on the performance and appearance, and helped turf to survive through that stressful period as well as come out of it. And again, similar to what we saw in the US, Richard, we saw that synergy between those two products of growth regulators. And the rates as well. The rates could certainly be flexible. In this case, we saw an effect at both rates. And again, what was really interesting, I didn't put up the volumetric moisture content data that we had, but there was no significant impact on that. And the point to say is, if you have hydrophobic soil conditions or you're treating for hydrophobicity, then continue with your surfactant programs. Please don't think that this is what that does. And anthracnose, other diseases, fungicides still form an important part of that puzzle, despite the reduction in stress that we see from Fiata. It was nice to see that the STRI confirmed that, saying that Fiata plus Primo was the standout. as well as Fiata alone at 20 litres per hectare. And I guess that takes us nicely into our field and practically, Kelly, what did you see? We've had this product in the market now for 8-10 months. You know, we've had lots of customers come back to us. It's great. I love these pictures. I mean, I can show you graphs all day. What are you seeing in the field? What are you hearing back?
To turn the phrase from one customer, I'm loving it. It's a game changer. And one man actually said that it had changed his life.
Well,
no, I think the overall feeling from the industry has been really, really positive. I think if I was to pick a few standout comments, amazing colour, and let's face it, we know that everybody plays with their eyes. They want it to look good. No discoloration from primo, even them first applications where sometimes we may see that toxicity coming. We don't see it with this application of the Fiata, and that's at 15 or 20 litres. Most people seem to be using the product around 15 litres a hectare with 400 litres of water, but people have gone up to the 20 just because they want it a little bit greener. Although I will say that we haven't seen any improved results above 20. It seemed to have been a bit of a waste applying a bit more than 20 litres. Really, from a golf course, maintaining a denser sward in lower light conditions. So, you know, we've all got them greens that are covered in trees and don't get the sunlight that we want them to have. They've seen an improvement in density, which is great, because then we know we get the same results in a football club with stadium shade issues. Great tank mix with fungicide and dew cure over Christmas, so they got the nice aesthetics. Okay. We have been tank mixing these, compatibility testing at Throws and at other places, but it was really used over Christmas with Dedicate, and other people had used it with other fungicides as well. So really good feedback.
Yeah, nice. And Dedicate, obviously not having Stressgard in there, it's nice to be able to add the Stressgard to Dedicate as well, which is a benefit in itself. Okay, well it was great. We've had some great feedback. I know we have, of course I do, but it's just nice to highlight that in some pictures there, and hopefully we'll get some many more good feedback this year. Okay, so we'll just move on to the end. Just by the way, as we approach the end of the webinar, a few minutes left now, just if anyone has any questions, you know, there is a chat box somewhere on your screen. I don't know what your screens look like, but hopefully there is a chat box. I encourage you to ask those questions now. Hopefully a lot of those questions have been answered today. And just as we come to the end now, I'll cycle through some of the points here, but just whilst I'm cycling through them, Richard, I just wanted to get your sort of any advice that you would have in terms of applying Fiata for. I think we've kind of covered it anyway, but how would you apply Fiata Stressgard now, particularly UK? I know you're US based, and that's your bread and butter. But if going back to what you know about the UK guys, how would you start?
Well, of course, you have a tremendous advantage in the UK because this is a biostimulant, and you can apply this as frequently for the aesthetics, for the root health, for whatever you are applying it in terms of stress mitigation. You've got the advantage of applying it when you want to. And whereas, you know, we have tolerances in the United States where we can only put so much product out in a season. So for me, in general, apply this before the symptoms of stress appear. You've showed that dramatically in the STRI data, where in the well-maintained system, you are getting good responses. I think that's extremely important. Getting those responses early on and then carrying those through the stress period is extremely important. So frequency of application is important, and I have 14 day, 21 day, whatever is appropriate, but do it well before the anticipated stress. So if you were seeing stress already this April, there should have been at least an application going out already in April, which is interesting.
Certainly.
Now we apply most Stressgard products, or a Stressgard containing product is applied 12 times in a season in the United States.
Yeah, it's a really nice. I always bring it back to my experience as turf management, and that is, just using it certainly pre-stress, but even just during stress. I always think during the club championship week, it's always a really high stress.
Yeah.
Get it down before that, and I think it makes
well
such
before.
a difference. Yeah, well before. But even if you're not, before and after, and I think you're really gonna affect things.
Yeah, any tournament, prepare it well beforehand. I mean, there were tournaments in the United States where they took our signature brand products and would spray them wall to wall on. The cost there is not important. The tournament is.
No, of course not. I can imagine what type of venues you're referring to.
But,
I think the thing is, we've got to remember as well at that time, it's the increased stress on the plant from what we're doing. We're cutting more regularly, we're rolling, we're more foot traffic. You've got all your caddies as well as your players, and then a whole team of greenkeepers moving up and down that golf course to prepare it. And the same when you start looking at football, you've got all of the gentlemen and ladies running across them pitches. So we're preparing that plant for that stress that it's going to face.
Yeah, certainly seems to fit into sustainable turf management going forward.
Absolutely.
Well, sorry, we are 1 hour now, but we've got one more. I think a couple more slides. We've got the CPD points, so we're gonna throw that in, a couple of questions. So please stick around. I promise it'll be worth it. I did just want to get from both of you very quickly. Well, I don't need your reasons. I just want your top 3 reasons that you would apply or start using Fiata Stressgard, because I know we've gone into a lot of detail today, but like if you were to take home 3 points of why you would use it, what would it be? Richard, your first go.
Well, my number 3 is the aesthetics.
Okay.
It won't be other people's, but that's where I land.
Aesthetics.
The second advantage for me is ease of maintenance. It's a situation where, you aren't rushing out as much to deal with the stress when you've applied Fiata Stressgard. You've got a little bit more time on your hands, but not any more time. You might not have to be as intense with the remediation that you have to do. And it's the big advantage from that. But the number 1 is root health. It's providing you with roots that are going to sustain the plant during the growth season, and that's extremely important. And particularly cool season turf grasses, they struggle in heat and subsequent drought conditions. And a lot of the time it's because you can't get around to get it done. You need a bigger crew, you need more people. It all goes to that in the middle of ease of maintenance. But the number 1 reason is root health.
Good. Great. I've got them written down. Kelly?
3, aesthetics. We all play with our eyes.
Yeah.
I would go 2, suboptimum light conditions. So whether that be too much light or not enough, because we know we're going to see that improvement in health. That's less susceptible to stress and disease. And first, and I think this is a really fantastic combination for the UK turf market, is tank mixing it with a PGR. So you're going to get that consistent growth, so you're not cutting it as much, you've got good surface performance, better speeds, and using it at renovations. Your Primo with your Fiata at renovations for winter sports is essential, especially for that routine.
Those are 6 good reasons, although you both did say aesthetics, so we only really got 5, but it doesn't matter, it's fine. Okay, so anyone who's looking for further information, that kind of concludes us. We'll do some questions. Thanks very much. Is there any final thoughts from either of you to close out? Or I think those top 3 reasons were great. Richard, your sort of closing thoughts on the UK and Fiata? Is it?
Well, what a fantastic. I mean, if I could have introduced this 20 years ago, I would have done.
Yeah.
This is a fantastic innovation for the turf market. I may be very biased because I was involved with its development,
Of course.
but it really is a great tool, and it, as Kelly was saying, it fits nicely into the existing programs you have, and it's not a replacement, it's an additive. What you're replacing is maybe effort, and certainly from radiation management point of view, this is what I consider best in class. And I know Envu, Environmental Science US LLC, always wanted to bring the best in class products to the marketplace, and this is certainly one of them.
That's great.
And my closing remark would be that it's fitted extremely well into the marketplace. Everybody that's used it has given some fantastic feedback, and it really does fit well into them programs as a biostimulant. So yeah, just give it a try. It's a fantastic tool, and I think we're very lucky that we've been able to bring this through from Envu, and I know that we thank you guys for your hard work on this product. And it was really nice to have a product brought to market that had already got all of the scientific research, and what that meant for us is we could do more applied science. So we could look at the way we use it, the rates, what we can mix it with, what it's compatible with, and then practical uses of, can we run a light bar, track a light bar straight back on the pitch after we've put the product down? And the answer is yes.
How much does it transfer? We've done,
we've done the transfer trials as well.
Some great trials being done. Some not so robust ones, but also quite fun at the end. That's great. No, well summed up. I think obviously if anybody's interested in the product, clearly Origin Immunity Solutions is the place to go and find out more information, or through the information on the screen. In terms of questions, I think we've covered really well what we've done. There are a few questions, and Richard, I'm going to throw this one to you. We did touch on quite a few times to apply Fiata Stressgard before the onset of stress. Someone has asked, James has asked, apply well before. How far in advance, or when is good? Before stress.
Well, our studies have shown that usually we apply the product 14 days before we applied the stress, and it works well under those situations. So it's well before 14 days. You don't know where the stress is coming. You know from a calendar perspective when you expect the sort of weather conditions that you have to start working harder. And my point of view is, if you want to put it on a calendar approach, that's good too, but you should a minimum of 14 days before.
Great. Kelly, this one's maybe more for you. Will it tank mix with 2020-30?
Yes, we have done some compatibility work on the 2020-30 mix. I see it kind of working more as a standalone. I'm part of that integrated management plan, so using the 2020-30, but then in between that, maybe looking at growth potential and seeing how often we need to apply treatments. That Fiata Stressgard stands on its own for its own benefits.
Yeah, perfect. And then James, you've asked a quick question on health implications. Clearly, if you want to understand, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that question, so maybe reach out to me. Obviously, we can supply MSDSs and stuff like that if there's any concerns about getting on your hands, but obviously all that's been covered. So
you don't want to get it on your hands because the pigment will stay in your hands.
Yeah, that's a good point. But health
impacts. You want to take those sorts of precautions, but this has an EPA registration, so all the toxicology work was done,
and obviously it was registered to
register the product actually as a fungicide in the United States.
Registered biostimulant in the Europe as well. So I think that's all the questions. Thanks everyone for coming. Of course, you're all here to get some CPD points. There is a code for basis, but if you don't want to use the code, then pop your basis number into the chat now if you're claiming basis points. And then if you're also calling bigger points, we've got the code and also the QR code. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming to the webinar. We hope you enjoyed it, found it useful. I'll thank Richard and Kelly as well. Great to have you. Great to hear your thoughts on the product. And yeah, much appreciated. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for hosting, Phil.
It's a pleasure.
No problem. Thank you all.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.